The information provided in this podcast is for general knowledge and informational purposes only. It does not constitute medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for diagnosis and treatment of any medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Unplugged Healthcast or Dr. Wall.
The level of confront you have in life is the level of success you will have. Confront the fear, the concern that you could not do something like this because you can.
Your body's going to contract, your brain's going to get tighter, you're going to get tunnel vision. If you've trained your mind through cold exposure and you've trained your body to work in this relationship, you'll pretty much be able to stay in your breath in a lot more environments.
Neck pain, backaches, headaches, fatigue, the list goes on, and you're likely on it. Tired of the broken system and big pharma? We offer logical solutions, teach you to think critically, and empower you to reclaim your health. Welcome to the Unplugged Healthcast with Dr. Kevin Wall.
Hey, welcome back to the Unplugged Healthcast. This is Dr. Wall, and if you knew what we knew, you would do what we do. It's a consistent statement I say, and it holds true. And today I have a miracle cure for you, a miracle treatment. You won't even believe it. Mayo Clinic reports this treatment has a significant effect in the recovery of not only your exercise activities, but if you have general overall inflammation or soreness, it will reduce it significantly. The National Public Radio reports that many people frequently describe that this treatment has a powerful and transformative effect on state of mind and sense of well-being. Medical research outside of that shows it improves insulin sensitivity, it manages your blood sugar, increases your immune system, and prepares your immune system to be better equipped to fight off all forms of infections. It's shown to be an effective treatment for fibromyalgia, arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease. It decreases anxiety, reduces soreness, increases mental resilience, boosts circulation, and it increases metabolism. This is too good to be true. There's no way. One miracle cure? Are you kidding me? Well, better yet, this treatment has almost no real side effects, and it's usually free. Yes, you heard me, free. What are we talking about? We're talking about cold. And no, I don't mean the Midwestern cold winters. I'm talking icy cold water. We're talking cold plunging. This is the rave of today. Everybody is talking, and I'm sure you have heard about cold plunging. Well, today we're going to dig in. We're going to dive in, actually, and we're going to get you information and unplug you to something you may have fears of or confusions and you're maybe even thought about. Is it something that applies to you because you're afraid to do it? I get it. Well, by the time we're done, you're not only going to see the benefits to motivate you why you should do it, but you're going to find some things that you probably haven't thought about. We're going to dig in heavily to how it's a phenomenal way to help your mental health, more even than your physical health. So to figure this thing out, well, last podcast, if you listened in, we talked about gluten, and I went and did the research. I bit the bullet and I checked out the Kolache Cafe. Yes, I suffered through a variation of different flavored kolaches just to bring you the information of how gluten is bad for you. It surely tasted good. Well, this week, you bet I did it also. I dove in. I'm on day 4 of cold plunging. Yeah, I have talked for a long time on how the benefit was there, but I was Hippocratic where I hadn't done it myself. So this week I went, and I can tell you right now, after day 4, that the research is in, the verdict is in, it's true. All those things I just described to you, all those effects, especially circulation, joint soreness, energy level, mental clarity, state of well-being, everything I felt soon as I did it. And the great news is it lasted. In fact, it's lasted for hours. They say the benefit of one cold plunge for 1 minute will last up to 48 hours. I've not seen the information out there telling you some of the benefits that are so obvious to me, and I know the research is that when you're in severe cold water for even short periods of time, you activate what's called your brown fat. Most people don't even realize they have different types of fat in their body. They just think it's all fatty fat. Well, there is a difference, and the difference is magical. The more brown fat you have, the less cold you feel. You'll find more brown fat in areas where people deal with extreme cold temperatures like Alaska and the Antarctic, but you'll also find less brown fat as you age, as you notice that you get colder. As the temperature seems to not be so cold to everyone else, you notice it is to you. Well, when you cold plunge, you expose yourself to cold water like this, you activate not only your brown fat, which increases mitochondrial function and your energy levels, but it actually, if you do it consistently, you'll actually produce more brown fat. You will grow. You won't get fat. You'll actually do the opposite. You'll see your other fat transform into brown fat. Some of the best benefits, don't miss out. You got to check it out. Well, today, though, to actually really help you understand the true benefits and the effect of mental health and cold plunging, I have brought in a friend, a business partner of mine. If you will, welcome into the show, Jason Law. Jason Law is the co-founder and CEO of Mental Health Centers of America, which Mental Health Center, no S, when you look it up, and they have a couple of locations, and I know they're growing. You also are the co-founder of One Mission. Jason, welcome to the show. And why don't you fill us in on kind of what got you started into this category and, why maybe I feel, and I know you are an expert in some of the things we're going to talk about.
Well, thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here and talk about this. The first part of my career, my 20s, early 30s, I spent, as you mentioned, with an organization called One Mission doing international nonprofit work. We built about 1,200 houses in Central America up through Mexico. Then I got to a point in my life where I would, generally speaking, just say went through my own mental health journey and had no intentions of ever being in the mental health space full time or as a career or as an entrepreneur. But at that time, going through my own journey, realized very quickly it's not only that you're going through your own mental health journey, but it's also difficult to navigate the space of finding help. Just navigating the different specialties, psychiatrists, psychologists, finding a trauma therapist. Where do I go for cold plunges? All of this stuff was new to me. I had the personality of, trying to attack something with vigor and, giving it my best. So I was kind of all in on what do I need to do to heal my brain and to kind of push through and figure out why I'm feeling this way. And so I got a lot of help, but it was really expensive to find different people. And I had to do a lot of research on my own. There wasn't necessarily a place that I could go to get started and have an entire team kind of there all wrapped around me. I had to, advocate for my own health and kind of write my own treatment plan, if you will. And so that kind of, after a couple of years of that experience, I kind of got myself healthier, was at a place where met some friends, thought, well, what would it look like for us to provide a better experience for people that went through the same thing I went through? And that just started the conversation of how do we build an interdisciplinary facility where patients can come in for a comprehensive evaluation, a good starting point. That's kind of the most important place to start, is to have a comprehensive evaluation with a proper diagnosis. And then from there, how do we support patients with a full team, all kind of working on the same treatment plan, under the same roof, coordinating care together, which is pretty much how all other medicine is done except mental health. And so our approach was really not to innovate things. We're not doing anything innovative. We didn't write anything up new. All we're doing is putting experts all together and getting them to work together in a teamwork fashion, all in the effort of getting patients cohesive care in an easier fashion, in a more affordable fashion. That's what Mental Health Center of America was launched to do. That's what we are doing, and we're seeing success with that. Proud to say that. And I wish something like this had existed when I went through it. And that's kind of my passion in leading this organization is trying to carve out as a patient, what do I wish I would have had access to, and what do I think the general community needs in terms of simple mental health care?
Well, this without a question, the reason I love you and love hanging out with you, and have even partnered in to help in some fashion, is that Mental Health Center of America integrates in an area that nobody has. In my world, we do the same. Chiropractic integrated with medical, integrated with physical therapy, nutrition, and you do something that is very seldom, or in my opinion, almost never done. I have been in care for 36 years, and I can tell you it is almost always, there's a relationship to how you feel mentally and how your body feels physically. And very few clinics would ever even consider addressing both of those at the same time. You have to go, as Jason just mentioned, to multiple different doctors to even get any type of care for those things. And it usually doesn't work because the doctors aren't working together. But that's really what sets Mental Health Center apart, correct? Is that not only does it have all the doctors together, but it also has the ability to help you physically. And some of those things encompass cold plunging and some of these other treatments we're going to talk about before we're done today. Before we get too far down that road, though, and our topic definitely is going to focus around cold plunge, but we're going to get to why and how you'd want to consider doing this for other reasons other than just getting cold in a bathtub. We're going to take a quick look at actually a viral video that kind of explains some of the benefits, and then we'll have a conversation that would actually help illustrate why you would even consider this.
Do you ever wonder why cold exposure feels so electrifying? It's actually because your mitochondria thrive when you're cold. When exposed to cold, your body triggers a survival mechanism that activates brown fat, which is very rich in mitochondria. This is to generate heat and energy through a process called non-shivering thermogenesis. This process not only burns fat, but also stimulates the creation of new, more efficient mitochondria. Cold also enhances mitochondrial function by reducing oxidative stress and boosting resilience, making every cell in your body more robust. What's the result? Increased energy, reduced inflammation, and a metabolism that runs like a well-oiled machine, all thanks to the incredible power of cold.
Well, there we go. The power of cold. I touched on a few of those things, but before maybe I go any further, why do you think cold plunging is good? And let's start maybe just the physical parts of it, and maybe help people understand why they'd want to do it.
Well, first, just to reiterate again, once we decided that we were going to integrate physical and mental health together, which once you make that decision of physical health does impact mental health, and mental health can impact physical health, meaning you could have somebody who's obese that's also depressed, and they're usually coinciding.
For sure.
Once we made that decision, then we kind of a domino effect of, well, what are the best things that we can do to implement physical health into a mental health clinic? And then obviously, what are the things we can do from a mental health? You've got providers and psychologists and psychiatrists, all the different licensures on the mental health side. But then when we went on the physical side, what are some of the things that help promote mental health that we can do on a physical side of the thing? Obviously, there's diet and there's a lot of things we could talk about. But to talk specifically about cold therapy, the physical benefits of that, there's an enormous amount of information of that all over the internet. She just spoke on that, the brown fat, the speeding up your metabolism, lowering your cardiovascular risk for diseases, an enormous amount of physical benefits. What's rarely talked about, or what there's little information on, are the mental health benefits of doing cold plunges. But the physical components, just before we get into the mental health components, one of the biggest things that happens in a physical component is just to talk about your vagus nerve for a second. When you get extremely cold for, let's say, 30 seconds, your vagus nerve, which is mostly going to be up in your upper neck area where you'll feel it the most, is going to start to be less inflamed, which is instantly going to increase your mood, increase your clarity, wake you up a little. So what we see with hundreds of patients, especially patients that are locked up, we say, like a first responder that maybe has an enormous amount of anxiety, a lot of post-traumatic stress, which is literally in the name, if you break it down, it's just stress from a previous event that's stored in their body. That vagus nerve contracts and you just get locked up. And we've all felt this in any scale, but on the extreme side of that, when you get your body extremely cold and you get in the cold plunge, of course your mind is screaming to get me out of here. But what your nervous system doing is almost calming your sympathetic nervous system to then allow the parasympathetic nervous and this vagus nerve to calm down, that allows rest, digest, sleep, all these different things, awareness, concentration to take place, because you're not in this kind of fight or flight mode with that nerve contracted so much. So just to start with that's probably one of the biggest things physiologically that's happening that will instantly make you feel different and think differently. But it's a physical thing that's happening. The vagus nerve, there's a lot to do with that and how you respond to how you're feeling.
The vagus nerve is really one of the major nerves. In fact, it's the only cranial nerve that actually leaves your head. And everyone has heard the vagus nerve, vagus reflex, all those things, but it actually has input in every organ in your body, basically from your neck down. So I am curious though, if you kind of look at cold plunge and we can see the physiological benefits, and we're going to talk about more of the mental health, but how long? Because now I'm curious, because as I started doing it, I got first up to my waist and then I got up to my shoulders. To get the vagus really is most sensitive and available up around your neck. Do they need to get in to their neck? How long do they need to go? All these fears, you've watched patients now for years. How do you get them over those fears? And can they start slow? They start with some of the basics of how to cold plunge.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it starts almost with a mental exercise of committing to push through pain. And this goes into the mental health the sides of things. But when you have to decide to put your body in an extreme environment, there's a conscious decision-making process that has to happen, right? And that alone for patients can be a huge hurdle, right? They're at a place where that's the last thing they want to do is feel more pain. So there's some work to have to do to get patients to understand the relationship between pain and building this resiliency. But we'll have patients start with just putting their legs in for 30 seconds. That's a starting point.
Okay, I did that. That was really easy. Almost everybody can do that. And actually, I will tell you before, not to interrupt you, but as I did that and I got out of it, I felt the effect that I pictured. Man, if I felt that everywhere, that would be awesome. And it wasn't bad. Like, it just gave me the courage. I could go deeper.
Yeah, during just putting submersing your leg, let's say in this environment, your brain is going to scream, let's not do this. If you can start to do the exercise of breathing through that, in through your nose, out through your mouth, which is immediately where we're going with patients, to start to retrain their brain, which really is creating new neural pathways of resiliency for them, to where their brain now is learning we can get through this. Now, the physiological impacts of just putting your legs in cold water, of course, you're decreasing inflammation, you're increasing blood flow, you're cellular regeneration, all those things. You'll still get the impact of the physiological things of the chemicals that are going to be released. It's just going to be, scientifically, it's going to be less released than if you're full body submerged. But it's a starting point. And to your point, you'll still feel the effects of it. As you go into a full body experience, which might be, your third or fourth or fifth cold plunge, you start getting into 3, 4, 5 minutes. Yes, it does become significantly more easier. Why is it more easy? Because your brain has now created new neural pathways, increased its tolerance for stress, which we'll get into that and why that's happening. But it really is that simple. It's exposure therapy. We definitely advise patients to start slow, and if they can get it, because you don't want to get in and then it'd be the last time you ever do it, because it's the worst.
Okay, so maybe the legs and the feet or something like that. 30 seconds. Do they keep going like 40 seconds, a minute with the legs and the feet and then work up to their waist? Or would you recommend, just go legs and then go waist and then chest? Like, is there an order, or it's just based on who you are and what you can kind of fathom overcoming mentally?
Correct. Yeah, I think everybody is different. I myself, if I haven't done one for a week, and I try to cold plunge 4 or 5 times a week. If I haven't done one for a week, that next one's harder. I might only get into my chest up, right? So you may have to, adjust your tolerance here and there depending on, how far you want to push. But that's your mind-body relationship, and that's part of what you're experiencing there, is how your mind and body are going to relate to each other. And so in this case with patients, they may just inch themselves forward, inch in more, or they may add more time to it, eventually getting to pretty much full body, 3 to 5 minutes, 3 to 5 times a week is the recommended. And that's where all the data and science comes from. Then you're going to be able to sustain those levels of, the serotonin, the dopamine, your resiliency.
All the real physiological benefits
Exactly.
kind of come with some repetition, right?
Yes.
I mean, the initial stuff will help you. And if you only did it a few times, there is some benefit, but the real benefit comes probably with consistency. And that would be true, of course, in all the things we talk about, that you don't regain your health in one treatment, one visit, one good meal, and so if you are going to try this, which I encourage you to do, as he said, or as I did, I just started off just what you said, 30 seconds, my legs. Then I went to my waist that same time. And then next time I'm in up to my chest, and then I'm up to 40 seconds, a minute. I'm working my way up to 2 or 3. Now I will tell you, as you said, people are different. My wife, little Greek gal, she jumps in, and first time in, she does like 3 times at a minute each. And like on the same day, I'm thinking, okay, well, next time she jumps in, she's like 5 minutes. And I'm sitting there going, honey, I think you need to get out. And she goes, I don't know. She loved it. She had such an endorphin release, such a mental clarity and energy. I have to just encourage all of you to try it at least once. You'll be shocked. The benefits are out there. The science I did says that you need to get up to 11 minutes a week. However that happens, it could be 3 times 3 or 5 times 2. But it seems like if you get 11 minutes every week in cold water, cold exposure, you get benefits that you just won't even believe. Honestly, I almost got to say that. Okay, well, let's do this, because I know that I'm not in your wheelhouse. Although if I could ask one more question, maybe, what are the temperatures? Is there a temperature? Should they start at a 55 degrees, 50? Like, is there a way to also do that? Or is there a point where the benefit is at this degree?
Yeah, I think the science says under 50 degrees, you start at under 50 degrees, because you have to get to your core temperature and you have to get your organs kind of.
Okay, so getting in at 55, 60 probably isn't going to get that much of a benefit.
You may have to spend longer in there, and you're not really shocking your core. What we're trying to do a little here, in the science behind the physiological benefits, is to shock, is cold shock, is to rapidly cool your organs. And again, going back to the vagus nerve, to rapidly cool that. And 60 degrees might not get you there as quickly. It might not get you all of the benefits. So I think the science is 50 or under. We keep our cold plunge at 38 at MHCA. It's pretty much as cold as we can get it, and ours circulates. That's the other thing. If you get into a cold plunge, the one I have at my house is homemade. It's just a deep freezer that I epoxied and keep it at 38. But that's not circulated, so that's even easier than 38. That's water circulating. You move your arms around in cold water, you're going to feel it even more. Or you swish the water in your armpit.
Well, that was my problem. I was in there swimming around like I was trying to distract myself. And then I had a gal sitting beside me. She was like in Namaste. She was doing yoga in there, moving now, and she seemed to make it longer than I did. Okay, well, that's good information. I will tell you, I've heard this, and I have to bust the myth. I take cold showers, or I just get in the pool. Well, I got to say, it's not a bad thing, but I don't think it's going to create the reaction you're really going to feel when you get in that low 40s area and below 50. So, all right, well, let's move past some of the physiological, how you do it and why you do it, and get to the real meat here. Mental health issues in America are a rampant problem. We have dealt with more mental health crisis. I know that the patient load in MHC is overwhelming. Getting people to do what they need to do is really the things I feel we struggle with, and I bet you do as well. Let's start off with, what are the diagnoses? What are the conditions that would benefit from treatment like cold, along with the therapy, the mental health therapy, counseling, psychology, psychiatry that you guys all do? And then, do they all have to do this? Are there other things they can do in our clinics that don't require cold plunging? Because I picture someone listening to this and goes, wow, if I got to get it in 38 degrees, I ain't going to go see these guys. I would encourage you, even if you don't do cold plunge, there are other ways we can help them, right?
To start with diagnosis is, cold plunges, to start with, those are going to be really beneficial for people with general anxiety, general depression, post-traumatic stress, which is part of an anxiety disorder. But those are really common amongst our community. They're our most common diagnoses. And all of our patients are recommended to do cold plunge because of one big reason is something called hermetic stress. And hermetic stress creates a good stress on your body to where it's not a toxic stress, right? So to create a hermetic stress, you have to put your body in a stressful environment, but it's like exercise. Exercise creates a hermetic stress. And you say, well, how do you get a runner's high? Same way you get a cold plunge high. What's happening is chemicals are being released. Your hormones are being shocked in a good way. This hermetic stress is going to release increased amounts of serotonin. We'll just start there. So a prescriber, a psychiatrist, is going to prescribe somebody an SSRI to help stabilize their mood. Serotonin is responsible for stabilizing somebody's mood. Somebody creating some hermetic stress, whether it's through running, which would be easy, your serotonin levels are going to skyrocket. What is that going to do? It's going to stabilize your mood. This is a natural way to do it.
Everybody's taking these drugs just to get that happen that are crazy toxic. And here you can get it to happen without any medication.
Correct. So SSRI, which is going to be, and you can figure out what diagnoses do we diagnose SSRIs for. Many of you already know that. So serotonin is a chemical that is going to do your mental health very good, very quickly. The other is going to be dopamine, which is your reward center. This is your pleasure center. Like, you think, how in the world would a cold plunge increase my dopamine levels, and why would that make me want to come back for more? Ask anybody who's cold plunged more than 3 times. 99% are going to say, I'm like hooked. You almost need it.
I'm there.
If you go a couple of days without it, you'll feel like we do when you exercise pretty frequently and then you don't exercise and you just feel, gosh, what's missing? It's that dopamine, that reward is trying to encourage you to come back. But that dopamine, that pleasure, is going to give you a cold plunge high, which sounds counterintuitive, but it will happen. Anyone who's done it will explain that. And that's where that, can dovetail into some of the mental clarity. This is norepinephrine. This is a chemical that your brain, your body wants to produce. When you get it extremely cold, you're going to produce a lot of norepinephrine. This is going to feel like energy. It's going to feel like mental clarity. So just these 3 chemicals alone, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine, skyrocketing. This is what psychiatry is how do we normalize these chemicals in your body, these hormones? We can do this through a natural remedy or through a natural therapy. Now at MHCA, we do both. I mean, we may have patients that justifies doing both. Some patients are just doing wellness. What's happening inside of your biology is the same thing that's happening by taking pharmaceutical chemicals. They just reversed engineered what your body can do naturally. And so let's just go into a patient that the patient or yourself getting into cold water. What's happening before you get into water and as you get in the water is your body and your mind are screaming, let's get out of this environment. I use the term, it kind of hijacks your brain's ability to make decisions. If you commit to being in this environment and to being in this stressful environment, you will for me, it's about the 30, 45 seconds. Literally, I can count 37 to 45 seconds before my diaphragm relaxes, my parasympathetic nervous system comes online. I can deep breathe. It takes me 45 seconds. It takes an enormous amount of breath work to get to the point where you can breathe or maybe even have a conversation with having your body in this extremative environment. Why am I going there? Once you create this resiliency and these brain patterns are built in your mind, imagine then how much easier it is for you to go to work and have a difficult conversation with a customer or an employee or a coworker or a boss. Your brain is now, it's like this is child's play. It doesn't make life easier in the sense that like you're not going to have problems and you're just going to overcome them and plow them over. But what will happen is your brain is almost comparing them to this stress tolerance of this isn't as bad as a cold plunge. Many people who cold plunge will say it's the worst 3 minutes of my day. Well, that's a good day if the worst 3 minutes is you just have to sit in a cold tub. What the hermetic stress is able to allow your brain to do is create resiliency that is almost like a superpower for yourself and keeping you in your breath, which again, going back to your prefrontal cortex, your brain, your fight or flight symptom. When you're in stress environments, your body's going to contract, your brain's going to get tighter, you're going to get tunnel vision. If you've trained your mind through cold exposure and you've trained your body to work in this relationship, you'll pretty much be able to stay in your breath in a lot more environments, to where it doesn't mean the environment isn't stressful. It's just your ability to absorb, adapt, and observe that you've practiced it a lot more. So the meditative aspects of being able to breathe through a cold plunge will retrain your mind and your body.
I remember when we were originally hanging out, and Dr. House, who is the head, I think CFO, psychologist for MHCA, talked to me about it. And I said, what the heck? Why would you do this? And it described it in a way that made so much sense. And I think it will to you if you're listening. We have a world full of fear. People are so afraid of so many things today. When you actually can bring up the ability to confront something you're afraid of and do it, and then find out you didn't die from it, there's a mental victory that occurs so drastic that it makes the rest of life seem almost simpler. The rest of the fear issues you have in life almost dissipate or decrease. I would just encourage you. In fact, I say often, the level of confront you have in life is the level of success you will have. And I think this applies right here. Confront the fear, the concern that you could not do something like this, because you can overcome it, even if it's 30 seconds. And you will get this feeling of encouragement or courage. I saw it. I felt it. My wife felt it. And I know you have seen this now. We're talking 2-3 years. You've been treating patients here in the Phoenix area, valley-wide, with these treatments. What have you seen now? Because you experienced it yourself a little bit as a patient before you started doing this. You've heard it. You've seen it. Your staff tell me about it. Tell us about it. What should they expect? What will happen?
Well, first, most patients are a little reluctant to get cold right off the bat. So there's some education and some motivation that takes place. And, some patients start with other modalities first. They may start with a red light therapy or something that's not as hard, let's say, for them to do as a cold plunge. But we encourage them to get cold as quickly as possible because the benefits from that are so great. Most patients begin, start small, and they all have large majority of them, the same reaction. After the first one, I kind of felt the effects. After a few of these, I really started to feel it. I polled our staff before this podcast and asked them to just share some of the things that they're hearing from patients. Cold plunge is the number one, I would say, somatic experience. Somatic's a fancy word for like your body experience of what patients feel, in which that's good for a lot of patients with anxiety and post-traumatic stress. We'll use first responders as an example. That's a community that love the cold plunge. Any of you are first responders, you probably, you have them at your fire stations now, and at police departments are using them all over. Because what happens with post-traumatic stress and any anxiety disorder is, again, your body's going to lock up. You're not going to feel your body. You're not going to smell. Your hearing may go. You don't realize these things are happening, but your body is really just protecting itself from its environment. When you shock it and you get it cold, it wakes you up in a different way. Many, if not all of our, first responders that get cold regularly, that's one of the first things that they notice when they come in, more than even doing some counseling. Give you an example. Trauma counseling is not fun. Anyone who's done it, it's a hard process to. Is a cold plunge fun? No. But a cold plunge, you'll get out of a cold plunge and you have these endorphins, you have your serotonin, you have your dopamine.
And it's only 3 minutes.
You feel a lot better. So for first responders, for example, that are, they can get 3 minutes in a cold plunge and they're coming out feeling better immediately, to where their responses are saying, like, I read some this morning, people saying, one woman said, this is the clearest my mind's ever been in my life.
Wow.
Somebody saying that after a counseling session would be like home run. That's great.
Right.
We got you.
And it was like an hour to 2 hours to get there.
So these are real testimonies. These are real patients that are going through really hard stuff. These aren't, these are real good testimonies in the sense of they're going through it and they're getting the benefits of it.
The research is in, you've done it over 2-3 years of treating patients like this in conditions that I know and I've seen don't really get better. People who get into anxiety, depression, they stay there, or they stay in the drugs, and they stay in this low level for a lot of life. And your experience is people are really getting out of this. People are getting real changes. People are getting results in different ways doing this.
Yeah, not only the immediate effects of it, like I just said, after, their first time, usually patients can feel a difference, no different than when somebody takes a pill. We're aiming for the same thing. This is just a natural way to get there. But big picture, what we're teaching patients is how to do self-care and how to treat themselves, which is really where our doctors would say they're trying to, and we say this internally, it's kind of a bad business model, but we try to work ourselves out of a job, in the sense of, you get patients healthy, you're working yourself out of the job. So in this case, we're trying to teach patients how to self-care and how they could do this on their own. This is a great big picture goal for patients to see, is when, once we get you stabilized, this is something you could do for the rest of your life. You can go to, many gyms have these cold plunges. You could do a DIY, chest freezer and get there. But this goes in the category of self-care, which many of our patients would initially have a hard time. They have a hard time with self-care. That's part of why they're in their mental health journey that they are in, because they've neglected their mind or they've neglected their body, and now their body or mind are screaming for therapy.
All right. Well, there you have it. Physiologically, the verdict's in. Everybody has heard it. You've heard it. You know it. You will physically get benefit from cold exposure. But mentally, I don't think you grasp, and there's such an epidemic. I just couldn't encourage you guys to share this podcast more with people, because mental health crisis in America is just out of control. Fear, depression, anxiety, PTSD, you name it. And I can tell you, this treatment helps it. And it's cheap, and it has no side effects. You hear me talking all day long. It's time to unplug from the matrix of big pharma, sucking you in and never letting you out. Well, here's an opt. Here's a door out. Here's an option. Start small, work your way into it, try it out. Give yourself a chance. You'll be shocked the benefits. Let's maybe wrap this thing up, Jason, with we know that cold has benefits, and you've got them in the clinic, and it's part as an option or part of what we do or what you do at MHCA. But there are other things you guys do that no one else is doing. Let's tell them about that and the benefits of that before we wrap this thing up.
Yeah, within our wellness department, the other, let's say, therapies that we encourage patients, and it can be depending on their diagnosis, are going to be heat-related therapies. So a sauna, we use red light and hyperbaric oxygen. And just to touch on those kind of in that order, heat and sauna, increasing your body temperature for 30 minutes or more, is going to do all the things that the cold plunge is going to do in terms of increase your dopamine, increase your serotonin, increase your endorphins. But it's also going to increase something called a dynorphin, which is the receptor for when you feel, again, stress. So hermetic stress. This is the kind of science and the chemistry in a dynorphin. This is the opposite of an endorphin. We don't want dynorphins because they make us feel like to get out of a situation. But when you push your body to increase dynorphins, which is the hermetic stress, your receptors for your endorphins skyrocket. So when you do feel joy, peace, relaxation, you're going to feel it at an increased level because you've almost exercised the opposite of the endorphin. You've pushed yourself into this stressful environment. Heat, exercise can do this, but sitting in a sauna after a cold plunge or before, in cycling those two, now you're just almost double dipping in all these different ways.
So those are good things to do. Heat with the cold.
Yeah.
Back and forth at times.
Yeah, exactly. And you can Google all the different ways to do that, but we'll have patients do a cold plunge, then 3-minute cold plunge, and then go sit in the sauna 30, 45 minutes, or 30, 45 minutes in a sauna, and then go do a cold plunge. But the heat therapy, outside of all the physical benefits, which those are enormous as well, with cardiovascular, with mitochondria, with brown fat, all of those things. But the mental benefits, twofold. One is going to be all the chemicals that are also released, sitting in a sauna, and this dovetails into a little bit of the hyperbaric oxygen tank, more so with the hyperbaric oxygen, but many patients and many people, including all of us, every single day, spend very little time in silence, just meditating on something outside of our phone. And so sitting in a sauna for 45 minutes, thinking about your mental health is going to improve your mental health because it's meditative. The exposure therapy of sitting in a hyperbaric oxygen tank, which is just what you would imagine if you've never seen one, it's 3 times the size of your body. It's tubular. You're sitting in there. Almost everybody, including myself, says, well, I think I'm claustrophobic, or I am claustrophobic, or there's no way I would get in that. That's no different than creating the resiliency of getting cold. Of course you don't want to get cold. Of course your body doesn't want to sit in a tank. Some people can do it easier than others, but when you start to exercise that pathway of your brain and push through that stress, that exposure therapy, lots of benefits can come from that. So our doctors may prescribe hyperbaric for patients for exposure therapy reasons, but also it's highly used for post-traumatic stress, any brain injury, physical or emotional. So post-traumatic stress is going to be an emotional brain injury, but that tissue, which your brain is tissue, you put this in a hyperbaric oxygen, which is pressurized oxygen, your body's going to work like 80% less hard to just exist, which allows these tissues to hyperoxygenate, but also repair themselves because it's pressurized oxygen. So anyone with a TBI, anyone again with PTSD, Alzheimer's, anyone with a brain degenerative disorder, the hyperbaric oxygen, which all of our brains are degenerating. So it's almost like everybody could benefit. I mean, you should look at some of these athletes that sleep in hyperbaric oxygen tanks and you wonder, how do they, just perform at just such a high level physically and mentally? And 2, how does it look like they're reversing their age? Well, they're sleeping in pressurized oxygen and doing red light and doing cold. They're doing all of these things that their body is rewarded from. So we use all those different modalities for, the patients can do all of the above, by the way. It's not just one thing. It's, they can come in and do hyperbaric, then they do cold, but
I think it's kind of like part of the treatment plan, right? It's part of the whole plan. It was like a package that just kind of allows them to do all this stuff. And if you went to some of these spa facilities that are out there that are kind of providing this, first off, you're doing it random, uncontrolled. I've seen the hyperbaric changes, like little tents.
Yeah, that goes back to the original concept of why we founded this, was why not put it all under one roof? We don't need patients driving across town because they probably won't spend another time to go over there. And there's an intentionality in integrating these things. You have a psychologist or your primary therapist coaching you through your cold plunge. Imagine you're going through trauma counseling. Your trauma counselor knows what you're going through. And then they also are recommending you do cold plunge. They're going to walk you over and probably do your first few sessions with you.
Yeah, nothing like this exists. I'm telling you, if you're in the Phoenix area, you got to consider, and if not, you should get on the plane and come check these guys out. But if they did want to find you, how do they find you? Can they come in and check you out? Can they come in and do a free cold plunge? I'm curious, like, how do we get them across the door to find out what's available? Give us your website and access points.
Yeah, all the above. Website's mentalhealthcenter.com. You can read all about us. You can schedule an intake appointment. We have a couple different intake appointments, all the way from a free 20-minute consultation with one of our psychologists to kind of just get started, all the way to full comprehensive, diagnostic evaluations. If you want to come in and check out the wellness, you can come in and just sign up to be a patient to do that, which basically just sign a waiver. And
so one day free visit, come check out all these modalities and get a cold plunge.
Give you some coaching. You can check it out.
Have the professionals walk you right through it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, there you go. Again, you've got no reason. You've really got to get past this constant dependence on drugs, which are doing nothing but toxifying your brain, your liver, your gallbladders. You've got to consider. And here's some simple alternatives. It's not that you can't manage their medications, but you will help them with the possibility maybe of doing less medications versus more, because every other mental health center I've ever seen really probably leads you deeper into that hole. So check these guys out. Check us out again. If you're listening to the show, I'm asking you a favor to share it, because you are our marketing plan. We don't spend a lot of money in trying to get this out, but the message needs to be heard. Please do me a favor, drkevinwall.com, mental health center. unpluggedhealthcast.com. Check us all out. But until our next Unplugged Healthcast, this is Dr. Wall and Jason Law, and we're signing off. Never forget to be healthy, be blessed, never give up, never give in. I'll see you again on the next Unplugged Healthcast.